Hi, I'm James Kotecki, and you're joining me here in the C-Space studio at CES 2020 with Mark Reed, the CEO of WPP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Thanks for having me this afternoon.
It's very good to have you. So WPP is, for many people at C-Space, probably a well-known brand, but I'm always curious to get people to define their own brand. So what is WPP in 2020, and how is that maybe evolving?
So I think today we define WPP as a creative transformation company, and it might be a little bit of a mouthful, but I think each word is important. Creative, because we're in the business of ideas, innovation, growth. Transformation, because we're in the business of helping our clients transform how they market. And we want to be a company, because we want to work together in a client-centric way. So that's kind of how we would formally define what we do.
And I know there's probably too many brands and examples under your umbrella to really share, but can you give maybe just a couple of examples?
Yeah, I mean, to give you a sense of the company, we're 135,000 people, major brands, Ogilvy, Gray, VML Y&R. We're the world's largest media planning and buying company. We're in the public relations, public affairs business. We have a very broad range of sort of creatively driven organizations.
So what is transformation going to look like for companies as they approach 2020? That kind of creative transformation. What are companies doing at the beginning of 2020, and how will you help them transform things by the end of it?
I think the biggest change and challenge for companies is this disruption driven by technology. And remember in the old days we used to have the consumer adoption curve. A company would launch a television, and consumers would adopt the television. In a way, I think it should be like the corporate adoption curve. Consumers all have this technology, and companies are in some way scrambling to catch up with where consumers are. So I think our job is really to help our clients understand where consumers are going, and how to embrace and make their products and services relevant in a way that consumers want to engage with customers. Interestingly, if you talk to companies, 90% of companies believe that they provide a differentiated customer experience. Only 7% of consumers believe that companies do. So there's clearly a big disconnect between consumers and companies.
So if consumers are out in the lead here, what are some of the trends and themes that you're seeing that marketers and companies need to catch up to?
Yeah, I think that the mobile device, it seems strange 12 years after the iPhone to be talking about mobile devices, but still companies expect consumers to interact with them in different ways, and surfacing information, transacting, everything you can do on a mobile device is clearly still a massive area of catch-up.
And of course we're moving a lot into voice now as well, and I imagine that's another area that you're thinking about.
Yeah, I think that voice, to my mind, voice is almost like a generational change. My children that grew up with voice will embrace it. I think other people, people in the middle-aged people like me may find it harder. And I think, we're still looking for the use case for the voice-enabled device. It will come, but I think we're still looking for it.
AI is a big theme at CES. It has been for many years, and every year it just seems to get bigger. I saw a tweet that you wrote maybe a little while ago that talking about AI-generated text, which is this thing that's increasingly possible to generate AI text. You tweeted that it was scary. Is it scary? Should marketers be scared of that? How can they maybe embrace that?
I sent that tweet, in response to an article where a magazine had written an article as if a computer written an article.
Yes.
When you read it, it talks to you in a human voice. And I think we always imagined that there was a difference between humans and computers. And that was what the Turing test, wasn't it? Could you tell whether you were talking to a human being or a computer? And I think we always felt that we had some kind of superiority over the computer. And maybe we don't.
Do you think that marketers are going to be able to embrace that technology? Because there's obviously AI and automation in generally are talked about as potentially disruptive to people's careers, whether they might be replaced or need to augment their talents and technologies. I imagine you're probably seeing a lot of that internally as people are adopting tech at WPP.
Well, ironically, to date, and I say to date, technology has driven greater headcount in marketing. Ironically, it takes more time to manage a search campaign or programmatic media than it used to. But I think we are reaching a point where there'll be a tipping point where actually technology will start to replace jobs, and that's something that we need to watch out for. You could say in 10 years' time, WPP will employ half the number of people if it's really successful, or if it's not successful. Like if we're really successful and embrace technology, we might end up employing half the number of people. For that reason, If we don't get it right, we will, because we won't be successful. So I think that it is the critical issue. But I think that for marketers, what matters is what AI can't do, right? Which is ideas, because AI is not necessarily differentiating. And what marketers are looking for is a competitive advantage, and that comes from ideas, inspiration, design, all of those good things. So we thank God we still need that.
You mentioned technology actually driving higher headcount. Is it just harder to be a marketer than ever before? If you could go back 10, 20 years and say, look, when you're marketing in 10 to 20 years from now, you're going to have all this technology, you're going to have all this data. People would say, great, I'd love that. That'd make my job so much easier. It seems like it's just harder than ever to figure this stuff out.
I think it's harder than ever. I mean, I made this comment that the chief marketing officer became kind of the chief communications officer, the chief advertising officer. Because a lot of time, marketing became synonymous with advertising. Today, I think it's much more difficult. And if agencies are being disrupted, the reality is that marketers are being disrupted, and the skills that CMOs need, just like the skills that agency needs, are much broader and much more all-encompassing. And I think that when you look at the life cycle of a CMO, it's less than 2 years, and it's probably the most dangerous job in the C-suite. You've got targets to meet. Every CMO has a different job description. Every company is organized differently, and you're always the person, in the firing line. And I think, WPP has to be the partner to help the CMO be most successful that he or she can be in today's world.
We're talking to Mark Reed, the CEO of WPP. You've been at WPP for 30 years, I believe. Is that right?
Nearly.
Is my research correct?
29.3 or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in almost 30 years,
Yeah.
Do you think you're going to see more disruption in the next 30 years than the last 30 years? Does that experience, especially being at one place for that amount of time and seeing that amount of transformation, does that change the way you look at the future?
So, I mean, just one point of fact, I left in the middle.
Okay.
So, which I think is important. You can't work in one place for the whole of your life.
You got some context. And
so you have to have some context. And I've been a consultant, which was probably the worst job I did in my life. And I run a startup, and now I've come back to WPP. So I think that, look, I can't say whether it will be more or less. I know it's going to be as significant. And I hope that actually we use technology to start to address some of the pressing issues that we face in the world as well. And I came back, like many people from our holidays, having watched the bushfires in Australia and everything else, and it's hard not to come back and be concerned with a lot of what is happening. And I think that if the next 30 years we can use technology to address some of those issues, then I'm much more optimistic about the next 30 years than I have been about the last 30 years.
And what kind of role do you think marketers can play in making the world a better place? Because there's one view of marketing that someone might have. I don't agree with this view, but it's all about the hardcore technologist, and the marketing is just something that gets slapped on at the end to kind of sell the thing, but they're not really doing the progress.
The flower arrangers.
Yes, exactly. So what's your take on that?
So look, my take is the CMO is the voice of the consumer inside the organization. And when you talk to successful companies, they're typically companies that focus on delighting consumers. And I think if a marketer focuses on that, then that's the right task. And actually, it's the critical function inside a company.
Is there something that you believe that most of your industry colleagues don't seem to believe?
I'm sure there's something, but not on the spot.
Okay,
No.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I really appreciate your time.
Let me ask that
please.
question now.
Yeah,
Data.
Sure. Data.
I think we have taken a different view on data from most of our competition. We believe that our job is to use data in our marketing, not to own data. That's a differentiating position, for WPP. Something that we really believe in. Data is critical, but I think particularly in this privacy-focused world, you have to do it in the right way.
Well, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but that was a great answer nonetheless. So, Mark Reed, CEO of WPP, thank you so much for being here.
Very nice to meet you as well. Thank you.
And thank you so much for watching here at the C-Space Studio. I'm James Kotecki, your host, streaming to you live from CES 2020. Stay right here because more great conversations are just ahead.